So welcome everyone. Sorry for the little bit of the delay. We are going through some Zoom updates just before we started. I'm sure we've all lived that one way or the other before. But ultimately, we just want to welcome you to our webinar today. We have two great panelists, and we just wanted to thank the Engineering Academic Career Club and the College of Engineering for help putting this on today. So one quick item is that we will save time for some live questions at the end of the webinar, and you'll see this QR code that you can go on Slido and submit any questions that you might have. And with that, I would like to introduce our two moderators, and we will get on with the session. So with that, I would like to introduce Shandon and Abhi, who are both Purdue engineering students. Shandon is with civil engineering doing his PhD, and Abhi is with mechanical engineering doing his PhD. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
So I guess, go ahead. Okay. Thank you, Justin, for the gracious introduction. So I guess today, we have two R2 faculty members here, Dr. Melinda Holtzman and Dr. Sattar. Forgive me if I mispronounced the last name, Dr. Sattar Dorafshan. Yes. So would you both like to introduce yourselves a little bit for the audience?
Sure. I'm first on the screen, so I will go ahead. I'm Melinda Holtzman. I'm from Portland State University. It's the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. So it got a little changed on the slide there. But I'm a faculty member and I'm also the faculty advisor. So half-time teaching undergraduate classes and half-time advising. And thank you for having me here.
I'll go next, I suppose. My name is Sattar Dorafshan. I'm an assistant professor, Department of Civil Engineering of the University of North Dakota. And I teach undergrad and undergrad courses at senior level and grad level courses mostly. I also do a lot of research. I direct two research initiatives here at UND, one funded by the Department of Transportation and one funded by the college. And yeah, I'm glad to be here.
I guess thank you both very much. So I guess we can go on to the first question of today. So I guess the first question is, what was your main motivation to follow an academic career? And I guess whoever wants to go first, go for it.
I went first last time. You go first this time. We'll trade off.
No, I think, Melinda, you should just go first for the entirety of this meeting. I'll follow up with you. Gives me more time gives me more time to kind of put my sentences together, I suppose.
Okay. Well, if I ramble on too long, please stop me, because I did not have a very straight, direct path to be an engineering professor. I had a lot of twists and turns. So if this is too long an answer, please tell me. But when I finished my master's degree, I went straight through high school to college, undergrad to master's. And when I finished, I was like 25 and I'd never been anything but a student my whole life. And I was so done with school. I had never imagined that I would end up in an academic career. I left, I got a job in industry. I thought that was going to be my career path. And I worked in industry for about maybe 7 years or so. And there was a couple things about it that was making me question that career choice. And I was really just thinking, like, what else could I do with my qualifications? And I still wasn't really thinking of an academic career, but the opportunity just fell in my lap, that there was a local college, someone was going on sabbatical for 1 quarter. They were looking for someone to come teach for 1 quarter. I was sort of struggling with, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I thought, I will just try this. And it took me maybe a week or so of teaching that I realized I loved it. And I was so excited about this classroom experience. I loved it so much more than anything I've been doing for years in industry. so I just stuck with it. So I wasn't really motivated to be an academic. I just kind of fell into it by dumb luck and discovered that I loved it. So that's my answer.
Wow, because that was a very interesting pathway to academia.
I think mine is also kind of unintentional. My path was kind of unintentional, just like Dr. Holtzman. I did my undergrad and master's in Iran. That's where I'm from. And I got my engineering license. I was, living a little happy life, but then I wasn't happy with the situation, with the economic situation, with the lack of freedom, all the stuff some of you might know happens in Middle East. So I decided to migrate, and then I didn't have a lot of money, even though I was a professional engineer. Was paying off the loans I had, and not college loans, but different types of loans for for housing and stuff. So the easiest way was kind of doing a PhD in a way, which is kind of it's ironic when I say the easiest financially was to do a PhD in the United States, and I always wanted to come to the United States. So, and I liked research. I enjoyed research. So I was like, okay, I'll do a little bit of more research then, a couple of more years, and then we'll see how it goes. And then I saw the life of my advisor, and then at the time, I think maybe he hid it very well, that he was too busy, but I just liked it. I liked that he was engaging with all these students, undergrad, graduate, postdocs, different colleagues. I like the fact that you have this kind of direct influence in individuals, highly skilled individuals' lives, and smart people, you have to be smart to get to college. You have to be maybe different smart. I'm not going to say smarter to be in engineering or STEM majors. So it's kind of very fun to have these interactions. And I guess seeing that, I think it's first year of PhD, I was like, okay, I think that's what I want to do. That's what I want my day-to-day life to be, if that makes sense.
I guess we can go on to the next question, and I guess Chandan will ask the next question.
Yeah, sure. So most of the audience is PhD students, and pretty much most of the time what they do is just design and perform their experiments and then do some simulations and write and present their work. So the second question that they have is regarding the skill set. So the question is, what skills did you acquire that helped you to get started with your career in academia? And how did you acquire them?
Well, if you're PhD students and you're, on the right track, it's one of the few careers where you absolutely need a PhD. You will not even, be considered for an interview if you don't have a PhD for academic job. And you're much smarter than I was, because I taught as a part-time temporary lecturer for many years with my master's degree before realizing that I needed to go back to graduate school, at about 40 years old with a kid and a mortgage. And it was much harder getting that PhD later in life. So I applaud your choice to do it now. There's two main branches to academic career, and one is research and one is teaching. And any experience you can get in both of those areas will help you. So you're doing your research, and the way your research is judged really is the publications that you do and how you present your work. So any opportunity to present your work, whether it's going to a conference, doing a seminar, something like that. But the more experience you get with public speaking, presenting your work to different audiences, that's a great skill. Whether you're presenting to other colleagues in your area who know the field very well, or whether you're presenting to other engineers who have the background, but it's a little bit different field for them, or whether you're presenting to a non-technical audience, it's all very different. So, that's a great skill. The more you can get published as a PhD student, if you can get a couple journal papers, that's going to incredibly help your resume. That's one of the first things that is looked for. So publications, and also, good publications, right? Good journals, respected journals. The other side is the teaching side. So any experience you can get, if you can be a TA, the more responsible kind of teaching you can do. If you're grading for a professor, that's something, but it's not really, like being responsible teaching. So if you can run a lab section, if you have an advisor who maybe is traveling and wants you to teach their class for a week or so, all that kind of experience is great. So if you can show, it's really hard when you first start off. It's scary standing up in front of a class. It's hard to judge how fast or slow to go, how much material to put in, how to figure out if the students are understanding what you're saying. It's a lot of skills to acquire, and there's no one ever really teaches you to be a teacher at the college level. That's what I found. If you want to be a kindergarten teacher, you go to college and they teach you about that. But to be a college teacher, they figured you're a student, so you know how to do it. So there's really nothing but experience that helps you with that.
I guess this is really true, because even from, I guess, to sort of go to the next question, right? Like, one thing I was going to say is that, like, a lot of graduate students, we learn how to do research, we learn how to present at conferences, but we don't necessarily learn how to teach. So I thought of just a follow-up question to that. Were there any formative experiences that you might have had that sort of got you interested in teaching, or might have sort of given you some ideas of how to maybe effectively teach? Like, for both of you, I would ask this question. Yeah.
Well, one thing that was really helpful to me as I was going through my years of being a part-time temporary lecturer, and sometimes I'd get full-time work and sometimes I'd only get part-time work. And I supplemented by teaching at a community college that was nearby. And I actually taught like a remedial math class one year. I taught physics for non-scientists class, just all these different kinds of experiences. And at the community college, when you start as a new teacher, they actually have kind of like a training session for you. So I got a lot more support in learning to teach from the community college than I did from the university. So that was helpful, but really no one ever told me, like, this is how you do it. There was a lot of trial and error, and a lot of and ask for feedback from students a lot, because they will tell you, we can't read your writing on the board or something like that. That's how you learn.
So I kind of want to circle back to the first question, I suppose. So to me, there are two set of skill sets. There are a set to get you involved or get started in academia. And there's a different set that makes you successful, and they're not always the same. As much as the hiring committees at universities want them to be the same, they're not. So I'm just gonna complement what Dr. Holtzman said about getting involved. So besides the paper, besides the teaching experiences, which are very important, you can also get involved in mentoring of undergraduate students. That's another part that you're going to struggle if you become a professor, if you had no prior experience with. Dealing with other students, specifically undergraduate students, is a different skill set that you just start learning case by case, and every student is different. So that's one part that I would add to as complementary to teaching and research, of course. And then again, there's another set of a skill set for being successful, which, well, maybe we'll talk about it later. How to get officially trained? Maybe there are ways. Maybe you can go through workshops. I'm sure ACI has teaching workshops. I know ASCE has workshops about teaching. I don't know if PhD students are qualified for them or not, but I assume so, because you have to pay for them. So probably they don't really care who attends. These are just nonprofit or for-profit, I don't know, organizations. Did I answer both? I think, yeah, those are the both, yeah.
Yes. So I guess for the next question, so I guess for your academic career, what did your timeline look like, bachelor's to current?
I think I kind of answered that in the first question. It was a long timeline with the different twists and turns of, you know, straight through master's degree to some industry experience to some years of, you know, like part-time lecturer teaching to going back to graduate school, getting a PhD. I've now been at Portland State as a, you know, full-time professor for almost 18 years, a long time. So it's been a long timeline.
Yeah, mine started in 2004 with my undergrad, and then immediately right after I did my master's. Both of those you have to take like a national entrance exam. And then my master took longer than it takes in United States. It's kind of normal in Iran to have a 2-year, maybe even 2.5 year long master of science. So mine took 2.5 years. I was trying to solve this problem, which took me forever to solve, and was not able to fully and completely solve it the way I wanted. Then it was about 3 years after my master's degree. It was a combination of adjunct faculty positions and then military service, that's mandatory for males in Iran for 2 years, and then also getting my PE license and working. So about 4 to 5 years after that was spent on these things. And then in 2015, I started my PhD. Then I did a year of research associate at Turner Fairbank Highway Research Center. That's in McLean, Virginia. That's a DOT National Lab from 2019 to 2020. And I joined UND in January of 2020.
I'll say one more thing if I can. It took me a really long time to do my PhD, probably at least 7 years or so. You know, I felt very guilty leaving a paying job and going back to school with a family and everything. That, you know, it was a financial hardship on my family to lose my salary, and I was paying money, you know, it felt very selfish, you know, that I was doing this for myself, that I wanted this degree. So out of all this guilt, I basically took on every part-time job I could get while I was a PhD student. I was, you know, teaching at the community college. I actually taught at the university where I was a graduate student. There was a company that was sponsoring my research, and I was, you know, kind of a research assistant. Anyway, I had, you know, family first, and then I had like paid work second, and then my research was a third priority in my life. And it went very, very slow. And looking back on it, it would have been much smarter, just financially and everything. It would have been much smarter to just bite the bullet, work harder at my research, charge up the credit cards, whatever it took, you know, and get that done and get a good paying job afterwards, you know, to get there quicker. So I'm sure you are all working along at a good pace, but that was a lesson I learned. Even though it's financially tight while you're doing it, it works out better in the end to get through the graduate school and get into a real job afterwards.
That's great. And the next question is related to how to get the job and how to prepare for it. So as in, like, some people say you have to do a postdoc before you get an academic position. And some people think that postdoc is not necessary. And the question is somewhat related to that. Like, how should I be approaching and planning my PhD in a way so that it will help me smoothly transition into academia?
I don't really have good knowledge about whether the postdoc is more or less beneficial. Since I've been in our department, we've hired a few new faculty, and I've seen both. We've seen some applicants that are a little ways out of their PhD and have been doing some postdoc work, and we've had applicants that are still finishing up their PhD when they apply. And it doesn't really seem to count for or against them either way. You know, the question of publications comes up if there's someone who's newer. You know, if they're getting to the end of the PhD, they don't have as much of a research record as someone who's done a postdoc and has whipped out a bunch of publications while they were doing that. But still, if they have a couple of good publications while they were still a PhD student, that looks very good. So I don't know, I can't really say anything more or less about that.
I would say, to me, I think having a postdoc experience is important in one way. And I talked about the skill sets to get you successful in academia, at least in engineering, right? One of them is writing proposal. One of them is being able to think independently as a researcher. One of them is to come up with proposal objectives, goal objectives and tasks, timeline, budget, and your anticipation of how long it would take for someone to complete these tasks. These are all little things that, again, as said before, you don't get trained for them as a PhD student, and postdoc might give you a chance to work on these. So these are very good to have. And I think having a postdoc would help. Depends, it really depends on how you do your postdoc. Some postdocs are glorified master or PhD students in some departments or labs. They just do whatever they've been told to do. They have a higher set of a skill set for writing papers, and some professors use them as that. Like, hey, I have this undergrad or PhD student cannot write a technical paper. Can you help him write it and you be a co-author? Which is good. You get a lot of publications out, but you don't really increase your breadth of depth in your research. So it really depends on how you do a postdoc. I think doing it properly is definitely a plus to me if I review applicants or when I review applicants.
And maybe one more thing, what you said about writing proposals and bringing in research money. That is one of the biggest things that is looked for when you're applying for an academic job, and having a plan for what kind of research you want to do, you know, on your own going forward. Another thing that is maybe more unique to engineering jobs is if you have collaboration outside of academics, if you've done some work with industry, government agencies, things like that, that's important too.
I guess if I may, I just thought of a follow-up question from some of your responses. And one thing I was wondering was, some people may be unsure about academia, right? People may be thinking, okay, I may want to do academia, or I may want to go to industry, or so I was just wondering, like, your thoughts about maybe going into industry, or maybe doing an industry or government postdoc, national lab postdoc, and then coming back into academia. Like, is that an experience that people look at in maybe a positive light? Or I just was curious, that since both of you have had, I would say, non-traditional, I guess, unique paths, right, to where you are. So I was just curious about, I guess, how that could manifest after completing your PhD degree.
I think it's really useful because most of, well, at least at the school I teach at, most of the students are not planning to go into academic careers. They're planning to get those well-paying jobs in industry and pay off their student loans, and they really want to know, like, am I going to use this on my job? You know, is this a practical thing to be learning? And if you have somewhat recent industry experience, you have a lot more credibility with your students. So when I first started teaching and I was straight from industry, that was a great advantage. They really were excited to hear from someone who had just been working in the field. You know, now that I'm so much older and I say, well, back in the day when I was working, you know, that was so many decades ago, I have no credibility anymore. But, you know, we have some very good faculty who have had academic careers their whole lives. And, you know, maybe they've done some, you know, maybe they've worked in a national lab or something, or maybe they've been in nothing but universities their whole life, and they can still be absolutely excellent professors. But I think engineering students really appreciate that practical perspective.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I would just echo what Dr. Holtzman said. Definitely, either one of them are industry or working with government agencies are important, both for your teaching and research, and both to the university, like your bosses, like your chair, your colleagues, and to the students. Like, again, depends on how you go after it and where you work, but in general, those are good things. If you don't know if you like academia, you probably don't, because it doesn't pay that much compared to any other thing you can do with your PhD. In engineering, at least, there are majors that, you know, the highest paying job you can get in them is to become a professor, but not in engineering. So if you don't think it's something you would like, because the most appealing thing to me was, okay, I'm kind of my own boss to some extent, even as an untenured professor. I make my own hours. Very shortly, I realized that, well, there's no hours to make. It's just work for 13 hours a day sometimes. And it is what it is. Like, yeah, I don't have to punch a card to come in and go. But some days I wish it was my job like that, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and I can go home and not think about it. So if you're not passionate about it, or if you don't enjoy it, it's going to be just rough, because you're underpaid with a PhD and and you're working crazy hours to succeed in an environment that you're not really enjoying. And there's a lot of challenges associated with it too. There's, in some colleges, most universities, I would say, there's a toxic environment going on between colleagues, unfortunately. They get jealous of your success. Maybe they might get mad at you because you unintentionally said something that offended them. I'm fairly certain Dr. Holtzman has seen things like that too in academia. So yeah, it's not like that. It's not all fun and happy and, oh, you've been adored by your students, or no. There's a lot of challenges associated with it. So it's easier to just do a industry job, maybe for a year or two, maybe do an instructor position or a postdoc, I don't know, and then kind of see if you like it or not. And then if you didn't like it, maybe go to academia. It is also harder to get in an academia position, a specifically tenure track position, than industry. So take that into account too.
I would agree with some of that, but not all of it. I think maybe I'm very fortunate to be in a maybe it's just Portland, Oregon is more mellow or something, but my department gets along very well. It's not, I would not say it's at all a toxic environment, but I was pleasantly surprised when I got here at how nice everyone was and how everyone got along. Definitely the department where I did my PhD, there was some conflicts between some of the colleagues, but I've seen this just as much or more in industry as well. Even after I left industry, my husband continued on, and he worked for a bunch of different companies, and every company there was like one person that just ruined it. So you always, I think, whatever field you go into, you're going to have wonderful people to work with, and you're going to have some not so wonderful people to work with. I wouldn't, personally, from my experience, wouldn't describe academia as particularly toxic environment compared to other places. But I would echo it is not as well paid. It's not as hard to get an academic job in engineering as it is in other fields. I actually started out in physics, and to be a physics professor, you pretty much have to wait till someone dies before there's an opening, because everyone goes into physics, wants to go into academia. Because engineers can earn more in industry, there's often more openings for engineering faculty, and the pay is a bit better than in other departments. At least at our school, there is a differential, and the College of Engineering pays more than the other colleges do. But it is a lot of work, and it's a lot of non-traditional hours. Students do their homework at night and on the weekends and stuff, and that's when they're asking you questions, and you kind of want to respond the work does ease up a little bit as you go along. You know, when you teach a class for the first time, it's hours and hours and hours of preparing for this class for the first time. I think I estimated that I probably put in about 4 hours outside of class for every hour in class, you know, for a new class. But when you teach it the second or third time, that's cut in half. And when you teach it the fourth or fifth time, it's, you know, it's much easier. So some of that does ease off a little bit as you go along.
Thank you so much for these really thoughtful responses. And I guess, so following up on that question, so I guess there are different types of universities where you can pursue a faculty career. There's R1, R2, teaching universities. And I guess for today's discussion, I guess the next question is, what are the main challenges of a faculty in an R2 university that you did or did not anticipate? So I guess maybe to preface that, would you both be able to just describe maybe how an R2 university maybe differs from maybe some of the other types of university settings that people could be at?
So are you asking, you know, for a university that emphasizes undergraduate teaching, what are the challenges of that? So at my school, we have a pretty robust research emphasis as well as a teaching emphasis. We try to make it equal. You know, we're trying to do really good research and we're trying to emphasize teaching. And we have actually a bigger graduate class than we have an undergraduate class. But it's still, it's a you know, large public university. The challenges are, I think, the kind of non-traditional student, right? We don't get students that are you know, that their parents are paying for them and they're straight out of high school and they're just full-time students. You know, we get a lot of older students that are, most of our students are working as well as going to school. A lot of them are working and going to school and have 2 kids at home, and you know, they just don't have the time to study and do homework and stuff that you really wish that they did. Students, especially recent years, students have a lot of challenges with physical and mental health and living situations and financial problems and all this stuff. So there's a counseling aspect to the job that I did not anticipate. You know, I didn't imagine hearing about the challenges that students go through and wanting to help and not, you know, trying to help students that are going through a lot of different stuff. So having to have a box of Kleenex handy was not something that anyone ever told me, but that's an important thing.
Yeah, I mean, what I would ask myself, I can't comment on teaching-based universities. I've never been in one. I'm imagining there's almost no research experience. So if you enjoy the research experience, a lot of the faculty position then might not be the place for you. It could be a good place to start, gain some teaching experiences, right? And normally they're easier to get in compared to, I would probably, I don't know. Again, I haven't really, I don't have any experience on that. R1, R2, I was actually looking up to see if my PhD, I had no idea. As long as a university has a PhD program and is research university, I think it gives you enough opportunities to advance. And I'm looking at my PhD university is R1. I didn't even know. My current university is R2. I barely notice any differences. I mean, there are, but I don't think that they stem from R1 and R2. They're just at different parts of the country with different, you know, structure of hierarchy and things like that.
So this is the last question that we have from the audience, which was pre-submitted. This is about how much time you spend between research, teaching, and service activities. Dr. Melinda actually kind of talked about it a little bit and how it gets easier to teach. But again, if you want to add something, please go ahead.
Well, I made a conscious decision to go for a full-time teaching job. And I think this was because of my my long struggle getting my PhD research done. You know, I had the years and years of struggling with this research project. And when I finished it, I kind of said, I hate research, which, you know, is a terrible thing to say. But I mean, I was really tired of research, and I had gone into this, I'd gone back to graduate school because I enjoyed the teaching experience so much. So that was my personal choice, that I enjoy the classroom experience. Sometimes I miss the research, and I miss being like up on the most cutting edge things and the, you know, excitement of it. You know, but I decided to have a teaching career. So I just in January started this job as a department advisor, and I'm supposed to be half and half. And it's more like 90% advising and 10% teaching, but I think it's because I'm on the learning curve of a new job. The service activities is actually an interesting thing. When you asked in the previous question about what did we not anticipate, I didn't think about this. This is actually sort of a third part of the academic job. You have your research, you have your teaching, and you have your service, and you are, you know, required to do all three. And, you know, when you're like up for promotion or, you know, having performance reviews and stuff, they look at all three. So there can be a lot of committee work, which I hadn't thought about beforehand. And there's a lot of luck involved, in good luck or bad luck involved in that. At least in our department, we just rotate people between different committees. It's not like you do the same thing all the time. And different committees will have different workloads in different years. So, you know, you might be on the performance review committee, and in a year when nobody comes up for promotion or tenure or anything like that, and it's really easy. And then you might be on that committee in a year where 4 faculty come up for promotion or tenure, and it's a huge amount of work, you know, preparing these folders for all of them. So it can be quite time consuming, the committee stuff, and sometimes it's interesting and sometimes it's not. And even without being a department advisor, just the student mentoring, the student advising, that kind of thing, you know, is also something that's, it's not in your job description as you're going to spend all this time sort of counseling students, but sometimes you do.
Normally, I think you every year you get a page 2, it's called. So your chair kind of assigns to you your roles and responsibilities, and then you have to sit down and talk to them about it. So they kind of define these, I think for at least what I've noticed in our college, in different departments, that's the trend, that the faculty, new faculty kind of have higher research load, expected to do more research, kind of bare minimum of teaching, maybe 1 course per semester. And then also bare minimum of service. And as you get along in your academic path, then you probably end up teaching more classes and be expected to do less research, even though your research load, if you want to be well, successful in, you know, publish a lot of papers, hire a lot of students, unintentionally or intentionally, your research load increases, even though you're not expected to do all that research, you're just used to it at this point. Maybe you built a lab or a program, or you have an initiative that it's just going, and it's just going to get bigger. If everything works out for you, it's just going to get bigger. You're going to have more projects coming in and more grad students. So that's at my current semester. Since I took 2, I have another role as the director of Transportation Technology Research Initiative now, which is partly research. That's 50% of my time now, but it's like on its own research and service activities. And then I have my role to bring external funding. That's the research part. Administer the projects I have. That's supposed to be about maybe 30% and then 20% teaching. So but I also have 10% of service. That's a laughing joke. I told to my chair today, I was like, so I'm doing 110% then this semester. And he was like, yeah, that was a typo, we'll fix it. But overall, that's what they want you to do. They that's the expectations, but it's up to you. Again, you could do maybe a little more on teaching and maybe a little less, as long as your performance is satisfactory based on, which is subjective, unfortunately, right? Or fortunately, as long as you're satisfactory in their eyes and you're happy, I think that's the main part. You're good. You have to just make sure your students are happy with you. You yourself is happy with yourself and are happy with yourself, and your bosses are.
I guess thank you so much for all these really, really thoughtful responses. And I guess from this point now we have live questions from the audience. So here's the first question from the audience, and that is, what is the process of gaining tenure at an R2 institution look like? So I guess both of you sort of alluded to the promotion, I guess faculty committees, and I guess one of the questions was, how does actually tenure look like at an R2, or I guess you can even generalize this to, I guess, any research institution?
Well, the job categories are very structured at a university, and you are hired in at a certain level. Maybe assistant professor would be the first tenure track. So if you want to eventually get to a tenured position, and you're looking at that first job, you typically hire in as an assistant professor, and then after a certain time, you'd apply for promotion to associate professor, and then after a certain time, you apply for promotion to full professor. And there's documentation, that says, what is expected at these levels, there's also, if you are very research active, if you've gotten some huge impressive grant, sometimes people go on a faster track. They can ask for a quicker promotion to full professor, but it's you're judged on research, teaching, and service. And when it's a question of moving up this tenure track, at least as far as I've seen, there's much more emphasis on research. So it's how many, what kind of grants have you brought in? How much money have you brought in? How many master's and PhD students have you been supporting? Again, publications, that kind of thing, just how your research is judged. Then they'd also look at your teaching and teaching evaluations from students. Are you, a well-liked professor? And then they'd also look that you've done your service, that you've been on some department and university committees, that kind of thing.
Yeah, again, I don't think there's a certain, I don't know of a certain distinction between tenure requirements in R1 and R2. I don't know. I guess I only been a professor in an R2 university and don't really care what other universities have for tenure requirements. I do want to keep my proposal, or not proposal, my CV good enough, so I don't really even care about our tenure requirement. I'm actually meeting our department's requirements maybe next semester when I graduate one other student, and I'm two years before the timeline that most people apply. I brought more money. My teaching reviews are good. I graduated enough students. So those are the main three that I have to do. Teaching review is important, amount of projects that are awarded to you, and number of grad students that you graduated. And I met all of them. Normally, some people think, okay, tenure is this crazy thing that you need to do. Normally, a professor is an investment that the university is making. It's a rather expensive investment too. So they don't want to make it impossible for you. They actually want you to get tenure when they hire you. It's not that, okay, we hire a bunch of assistant professor and we give tenure to one of them. No, every assistant professor is expected to get tenure and promotion. Also, remember, some universities have tenure and promotion as two separate things. So you might get promoted to associate professor and you might not get tenure and vice versa. So, but most of the universities, it's the same. But then I think when you go from associate professor to full professor, then the requirements are, of course, a little more stringent because you're expected to be better at your job after maybe 10 years of doing it than when you started, right? Or 12 years. If you have offers or if you go to interviews, definitely ask these questions like, what are your requirements for tenure and promotion? What's the timeline? Do you have a document? Do you have it documented, or is it something that you guys or the committee decides on its own? And most of these are public records, so at least in the state universities that are funded by the state money. So they should be public to these criteria.
And I'm actually not a tenured professor. You know, when I started as full-time teaching faculty, not research faculty, I was not on this tenure track. And I think part of it was just because for me, it was later in life, I wasn't that concerned about it. So the teaching track was, you know, instructor, senior instructor 1, senior instructor 2, and they've just recently changed it that now there's these teaching professor ranks. So I'm an assistant teaching professor, and I can apply for promotion next year to associate teaching professor and full teaching professor. It doesn't have the special protections of tenure, but it's not at all like a temporary or uncertain job. It's called continuous appointment. And just like a regular job, it's always the possibility that you could be fired for some cause, but there's no expectation that you would be. There's said that the university invests a lot in their faculty. They don't want us to go. And the union is very strong. So as continuous appointment, I think if they had some reason they wanted to fire me, they have to give me like 6 months notice or something crazy like that. So it feels very secure, and I don't worry about the fact that I'm not tenured and other faculty are. It's not that big a difference.
Thank you so much for these detailed answers. And I guess the next set of questions are now actually for each of you both individually. So for Dr. Holtzman, this question is for you. So as someone trying to decide between industry and academia, what about industry made you want to change into academia?
So it was nothing about industry in general. It was very much my personal situation. So I was working in the defense electronics industry. I'd started at Rockwell International, and then I was at Hughes Aircraft for a while. And this was a long time ago. This was like the 1980s. So Reagan was president. He had this big Star Wars program. It was all very military oriented. I was working in a group called Countermeasures, and it was advanced research and development. And it was very fascinating, but it was all these, like kind of exotic new weapon systems. And morally, it really bothered me. It's not that I don't think a country should be able to defend itself, but it was not what I wanted to dedicate my life to. So I just kind of had this, how did I find myself here moment? Why am I working on all this military stuff? This is not where my passion is. And I was just having nightmares about work all the time. So I felt that I needed to do something else for that reason. And the other reason, to be honest, is I wanted to start a family. This was way before there was anything like Family Leave Act. There was no legal requirement for companies to have maternity leave at all. Hughes had 6 weeks maternity leave, and that was considered very generous. My friends were having children and working to the last possible second, and then having their 6 weeks maternity leave, and then being back at work full time with this 6-week-old baby in full-time daycare. And that I didn't want that either. So one of the things that attracted me about academia was the flexibility of the time. That even though you may work long hours of nights and weekends, you have a lot of flexible time, you know, and if you can financially afford it, it's easier to take time off, you know. So I was able to take a whole term off when my son was born and be home full time for like 4 months instead of 6 weeks. I was able to go back teaching part-time, just teaching 2 days a week while he was, you know, until he was like a year or something. So that was also important to me.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this. And I guess sort of a next question for Dr. Sattar. So I guess the question that we have is, So I guess the question that we have is, do you notice any hurdles in obtaining funding or publishing? So I guess you spoke about the different parts of what you need to show for the tenure track and the tenure process. And I was wondering, especially given the current climate, like what are the main challenges in getting funding or publishing? Because I think these are some aspects that maybe we don't think as much about as graduate students. So like as a graduate student, I guess our main concern is to do good research, to attend conferences, write publications. But I guess, as you suggested, as a faculty member, you have these other responsibilities of being able to manage students, being able to work with, for example, undergraduate students, and also being able to support your group. And I was just wondering, in that respect, what challenges have you experienced, or what challenges have you seen that others may have experienced, and how do you overcome them?
I would say, of course, all these are new skills, right? And there's going to be a learning curve. But I don't think getting the funding is the hardest thing that everyone thinks, okay, I have to get the funding. Yes, that's true. And you have to, right? If you want to get promotions, and if you want to be famous, or if you want to be impactful in your field of study. But executing the project, finding the right person to do the project, and maintaining and establishing a good relationship with the student or postdocs who are involved in the project, that's more challenging, at least for me, has been more challenging than getting the funding. Thankfully, I'm in a state that the state is extremely rich. These guys have agriculture and oil and gas. So nothing really hits them, not COVID, not recession. It's been very good standing, and a lot of my funding, I have both federal and state funding, but a lot of my projects are funded by the state. And at this point, I just write 5-page proposals, and I don't know, I get $200K a year because I established that relationship with them. They know I deliver what they want, and there's not a lot of competition in my area of expertise in the state, and they don't want to work with out of state for financial reasons also. I don't know if I answered that question or not, but yeah, I would say finding the funding agency, start local. In terms of publication, yes, publication, you're not supposed to write papers anymore, right? Your students are supposed to write them because they need to be first author. You're supposed to be co-author. So your role should not be to write everything for them or to correct everything for them. You should let them, and it's an excruciating process to maybe would take several iterations. I remember the first paper I published with my student took us maybe, Elsevier one, took us maybe 4 or 5 main iterations between you and him that I restructure. I would just say, hey, this is not good. How do we change it? Think about it. And then he would change. And I knew the answer right away. I could have just told him, yeah, this needs to be like this. But I figured it's not going to work. It's not going to stick in his mind if I just give him the answer. So, but once you get them trained, hopefully they'll be better writers. And writing, especially for us international students who are not native English speakers, it's extremely hard. And to master that, so you have to have writing skills and also technical writing skills. There are also 2 different things. So it's going to take a while, and it's a hurdle. Some might not be related to your question, but some of these research universities or some of the funding agencies, specifically the private ones, they don't like you to publish their work, basically. So you have to also be aware of that when you're working with them. be like, hey, we like to publish, or my student needs to publish, so let's come up with a intellectual property agreement or something like that.
Great. So we're almost running out of time, so I will wrap it up. Dr. Holtzman and Dr. Sattar, thank you so much for being here, because you have taken some time off your busy schedules and you're here with us to share your experience and any questions that we had regarding the career opportunities in academia. And this event would not be possible without Stephen from College of Engineering and also the EACC board. And finally, we have one announcement. We would like the audience to know that we have a mentoring circles coming up. Please do sign up, and the deadline is March 15th. In this, each circle consists of around 4 to 6 students, and they will be paired with 1 or 2 professors. That's what a typical circle in this program consists of. We'll be meeting for about 8 times over this summer, and you'll get a really good experience talking to the professors in your circle, asking them about research statement, teaching statement, and all. And overall, thank you so much for attending this.
Thank you, panelists. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, bye.
Yes. Thank you very much for having us. It was a pleasure. And I just threw my email quickly in the chat there. If anyone has any questions they want to follow up, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to be in touch with any of you.
Yeah, and I was happy to be here. And yeah, hopefully what I told you was somewhat helpful. Good luck.